Okay. Double check that everything's up and working. Looks like it. Cool. Back at it. Awesome. Yeah, after a 5-month pause, I wanted to start this up again. I did not have a computer that was up to the task of streaming last time. I've since upgraded, and after running a couple tests earlier in the weekend, I think this new machine is more than good to go, which is encouraging because I think getting back into this component library build is going to let me test some concepts that I've been writing about. Specifically, this idea that there's there's a lot of different types of components out there. My current hypothesis is maybe 7. And I don't think this is a really out there idea. I kind of trust that other folks smarter than me have probably figured this out. That was also the case with base components, right? Designers have already started kind of agreeing upon these types. But for these, I think there's some more out there, and I'm trying to kind of figure out those definitions. And ideally, this is something that's useful to people beyond me. If it's useful for my own work as a design ops practitioner and then the team that I support in my day job, that's great. But if it's helpful for a wider audience, even better. So I'm hoping that this component library build live stream series that I'm doing, where I'm taking one of my favorite products, YNAB, and I'm just using the inspect tool in the browser to see what it would look like to build a component library in Figma out of it. I'm hoping that I can use this experience to test out some of those ideas. So but for this stream, since it has been 5 months, I think it's important that I just first see where I left off because it's a dusty file. Hasn't been touched in a while. So just kind of want to see where I was thinking, what I was thinking, and what work kind of is ahead. So we'll switch over to Figma here. And I've got an inventory page, I've got components, and then this like kind of thumbnail and administrative stuff. Nothing too exciting in here. I have visited this because this is where I make the thumbnails for the YouTube streams and whatnot. But it's these other 2 pages where the work is happening. So we've got components and inventory. And yeah, and you can see there's some base components happening here. I've got, well, what I used to think were all base components. And, that's another thing. My last stream was a couple weeks just before Config 2022. And of course, the big announcement from this most recent config was the component properties feature, which really changed, I think, how a lot of folks who originally were super on board with base components, but then already starting to shy away from them in the months leading up to config, really allowed folks to, shift their thinking and move away from using base components in libraries. I only recently, in the last few weeks, I think, got on that train, got on board. I really saw it proven out in a couple files that I was working in that was this newer way of working really is going to be better for the long run. But yeah, it's kind of cool to look back on this file and see, these base components, these things that I would now call other types of components and wouldn't use in a component library, probably. I mean, this swapper, what I would now call a placeholder, definitely helpful and necessary. But these padding ones, I would reconsider them. And then this, this padding token, right? You're trying to use components as tokens, nesting this inside another frame, but then its parent having looks like 6 pixels corner radius, trying to set up tokens using components. It works. It's clever, I think, and a viable approach, but I don't know if it makes now with the features we have for the most useful components anymore. So, but we've got a couple what I'm calling interface representatives here already built. So we've got this idea of like a budget menu, remembering building that. Yes, that's right. We started kind of in the top left and okay. And then we've got this, which I would call a content carrier. So it looks like what's happening here is we have these corner radius tokens, and then we're making some overrides to the color, and that purple box is getting swapped out for this, right? So if we were to drill through in our layers panel, you can see we've got our padding, then we've got on another separate layer our border radius, and then these instances represent interactive states. And we've got a default state, a hover state, and a focus state. So, okay, this is cool to see. The logo, of course, and then that interface representative, this is just a button inside of what is the sidebar. And I'm remembering building this. It has a max width. Right. Oh my gosh, and we have text truncation now. That's going to be so handy because check this out. If I flip over to the actual product, this is our demo budget, right? This is what we were working with last time. And you can see that when this, what are we calling it? A sidebar. When the sidebar is minimized enough and you have a long enough string of text here, it starts to truncate. And I remember, oh, come on now. I remember, yeah, this, noticing this when I was trying to figure out like the max width and thinking like, oh my gosh, that's going to be a tricky thing. But now we have text truncation. So that solved itself, which is great. All right. So yeah, it looks like I was in the middle of kind of putting this together. We've got this component built. These, if we inspect on them, if I'm remembering correctly, I was understanding them as sort of buttons. It looks like they're list items with links. So not true buttons, but certainly presented as buttons. But behavior-wise are more like tabs. These are just different views, if you remember, of our budget. Like our, it's hard. YNAB talks about this in a post they put out a year ago where they changed some of the language in the interface to make this more straightforward because you could, they mention this verbatim. I might even have to dig up the article. They mention how the word budget was being used in a ton of places. So you can see we're on the budget tab. And so what we're looking at in like the center of the screen, this is our budget. But you could also kind of argue that all of YNAB is your budget. Like that's kind of how people were just talking about it. I think their users at least. So that was confusing. And then there might have been something else about before they changed some language and some of the interface here around this ready to assign bucket. There was also like the word budget was being used in this space too. So it was really confusing. But anyway, these are kind of more like tabs. You can see when I click on them, this big field in the middle changes. The contents of it change. So more like tabs. And let's see what they're list items, but what's their class? Nav link. That's, yeah, okay. I would probably, tab makes sense to me, but yeah, at least for how I think like the job that they're doing in the interface, right? We don't just have one big page. Or they're pages maybe, Figma has the same concept, right? We've got our pages here. These aren't buttons though. They don't look like buttons. They're kind of just links. They're links. They take you to a different view. So anyway, so this is as far as I've gotten component-wise. We've got our sidebar. It contains, that's right. There's like the actual content, but then there's this thing on the right here, this resizer. We needed something, right? Because kind of thinking ahead to being able to make a component library that really enables folks to prototype, like making sure you know, that this kind of behavior, being able to grab, there's like, what is it? It's 3 pixels that you get. 3 pixels if you wanted to drag this around. So making that possible in Figma was, I think, important. And that I think also, if I'm remembering correctly, yes, affected our right padding. You can see we're accounting for that 3 pixels here. So that's as far as I got for components. And then the inventory page is just a lot of like screenshots and comments. I remember this was really difficult. It was frustrating for me to put this together because again, my old machine wasn't up for it. So it was just, it was hard. It was hard. And the color grading. Right, we've got all these blues and teals. Organizing these, I remember, was difficult. I was not sure how to approach it. And so looking at the styles, we've got a pure white that we need. I'm suspecting like our text and yeah, these modals. That's not in any kind of group, but then I've got 3 other groups. I've got my grays, my teals, and then blues. And I might rethink this. This is also interesting that I've got it organized darkest on top, lightest on the bottom. I was working in another file recently where I had it flipped. So that'll be a fun experiment to see which arrangement is preferable. Maybe different arrangements are better for certain circumstances. But this is cool because with all these screenshots, I'm glad I did this because I really wanted to, there's so many interactive parts in the interface. Like we've got hover states, there's lots of little menus that can appear, and within menus, you know, tabs within menus, things that can expand and collapse based on, you know, what's selected on the canvas. Different things are available in these right panels. This, I think, is what makes it a really challenging interface for me. I've never, in my day jobs, worked on contributed to a product that had these sort of interaction patterns. Yeah, we've got like calendars, lots going on in here. Okay. I'm glad that I didn't get so far with the components now that component properties are a thing. I'm wanting to revisit this. I think with the introduction of component properties, I would keep my swapper, but again, I want to start testing out some of these concepts that I've been writing about. This post in particular. I want to start naming them after these names, right? So I mentioned like a swapper is more like, I've been calling them placeholders. It makes sense to me. And I'm going to write about this, but you know, the stream is a good place to also draft, right? So the little scissor icon, I want to also explain like why these pictograms, what's the deal with that? I think having a little visual symbol to hang on to can help folks, it helps me at least remember like, what is this thing's job? What does it do? Why does it exist? And for placeholder components, you know, it's the same concept, no different than what people have called slots or swappers, or I think there's another name out there that I'm forgetting. But placeholder feels the most appropriate to me. And the reason for the scissor pictogram is because, you know, you kind of, if we were to try and translate this into maybe a more analog activity, it's kind of something that you would cut out and then put something else in. Like it's just holding space, and it's meant, maybe it has like perforated edges, you know, like if you're ever opening a new box of tissues, there's that little bit of cardboard that is present where there will eventually just be like the little 2 flaps of plastic film, so that way your tissues stay clean and protected, and then you would take tissues out, right? So that little cardboard space is like holding a place. It's a placeholder for what will be just where the tissues come out of, and that's kind of how I think about these components, as if they had some sort of perforated edge, and we're just like taking something, except I guess unlike the tissue box, which is maybe not a good metaphor, we're putting something back in its place. So maybe for these, maybe it will be fun to just have a sort of dotted line stroke. Maybe we can do that, and a slightly different fill. I think I've seen folks like Rid from Figma Academy also do this same sort of thing. We'll make them round, give them some more space. Great, so we've got placeholders. And yeah, I think I want to get rid of these tokens. Like, I think this is all we need. So I'm just gonna delete these. This guy, this is still helpful. And I think also not any more expensive than if we didn't use it. So we've got our placeholder here, and this we're going to use anywhere. Like, we only need one placeholder. You only need one per file, really. And if it lives in a library, there's no reason you couldn't publish it. Sometimes it's nicer to work with a local placeholder, I think, when you're doing swapping, just because then you're usually swapping with local components, usually. And you're probably usually swapping with something that holds content like this. So just to go over content carriers real quick, this is an interesting one, and this is good. I want to test these definitions. So content carriers are concerned with, this is a typo. I'm missing a word here. Content carriers are concerned with what the component holds, the type of content, how much content, how that content behaves. Does it break lines or does it not break lines? What does it look like? You know, what are the text and color styles that are applied to it? Or if it's photography or images, what are those like cropping rules? You know, is it set to fill or fit? Stuff like that. And then content is injected into them by way of overrides, not swapping, right? Because yes, swapping is a job for placeholders. So why the little pencil? I was just thinking mostly about content, you know, especially written content. So a pencil seemed to be an appropriate pictogram. So let's zoom back out. So does this meet that definition? I think so. And you know, something else, I'll just do a sneak peek. Why not? My intent with this post is to tease what will eventually be longer posts for each of these. So like I'm in the middle of drafting a follow-up post about interface representatives. And let me open that up. I was literally just working on it before this. So for each of these like deep dive posts into a type of component, I'm thinking right now what I want to cover are like, you know, what's the definition, why that particular icon or pictogram, what are the best practices, what are the mistakes to watch out for, kind of summarizing like, okay, what are we saying this component is and is not? Just summarizing that, and then getting into how do you use this type of component with other types of components. And what I want to look at here is, because this is an interface rep, right? This represents a piece of interface. It's using what I think, I'm testing this, but what I think is a content carrier. And so if we look at interface representatives and content carriers, let's say I have a commonly used newsletter sign-up form. It uses input fields like first name, last name, email address, and some checkboxes. But those components, you know, their labels are going to be called things like input label or checkbox label, button label. But if I have this like newsletter sign up form I'm using all over the place, you know, that stuff will get overridden to say like first name, last name. So I think this might be different. And if I go back to like the definition, um, oh, this is tricky because it's like these are still separate components. So one of the things that I think would be a mistake for an interface representative is to store real content in it. Because that's another component's job. That's a job of a content carrier. Instead, you know, interface representatives are bound to need have text in them, right? And the text is probably going to describe like what is that specific piece of anatomy. Like this is the label, this is the value, this is the placeholder, this is a title or a username, a street address, but it's not going to have like, you know, it's not going to say John Doe or something. It's going to say like first name, last name. It's not going to say like have like a fake address or a fake phone number. It's going to have like the formatting for that address or that phone number. Instead of like September 5th, 2022, just picking like a random date, it would say month 00, like 0000 for the year. I think that is more appropriate for an interface representative because it's showing you text goes here, content will go here. This is what it looks like, but not holding actual content because again, job of another component. So here we're kind of doing that same thing, like budget name, email at gmail.com, you know. And I guess having this be its own component, you know what though? I don't think we need it. Even though it's not at all any more expensive to have in these instances, I don't think we need it because we have, if we were to take these layers and break them. Oh, wow, parent instance is detached too. Okay, that's really cool. I didn't know that was possible. So I'm like 3 levels deep. And what I was in were instances of those base components that were controlling, like the padding, the corner radius. And I thought I was going to have to detach them all the way up. But that's not the case. It just detached everything. Watch if I undo. I'll do it again. So here we are. This is our default, you know, this is our interactive state property. We're in the default instance. We go down through the corner radius, down through the padding, and then we get to an instance of this content, right? And so I detached Option Command B, and all of them detached. That's super cool. So we'll do it across the board. So now what we get, yes, right? Because, and this, I had beef with this when they announced the component properties and I started testing it out. Like this select matching layers, you know, within a component instance is such a powerful, like a really big quality of life enhancement. But you can only do it when you can't do it within another instance, like a nested instance. And so I was like, oh man, like it works to a point, and that's where it's like, okay, like it doesn't work with base components. And so it could have, for some people, maybe like spurred that idea. But this is great now. So now if we need to like make sweeping changes, we can use this feature of select similar layers or the same layer and do things that way. And because we're using, I used auto layout all over the place on this thing. Like if this isn't going to be the case, I don't think, I don't expect YNAB to go through any huge, you know, interface overhauls over this. But like, you know, if I was on their team, it was helping maintain their design system, and like maybe they want to bump up the space between these items a little bit. Like this makes it really easy for me to just, you know, add in 4 pixels between the budget name and the email address. Like I don't need a base component to manage that anymore. So let's get rid of that. I think the contents still make sense. So like calling it budget name and then just saying like, this is where the email goes. Yeah. And then we've got our states. So I think this now is a much better component. I do want to rename these layers though, and we should do that while we're here. Even these budget name. Oh, and you know what? Let me move where this is happening. My little keystroke thing, because I want to be able to have more of a layers panel here. Okay. So first thing we've got, yeah, logo container, YNAB logo, great. I'm just going to start calling these containers. I think this is something I saw somebody else recommend, is just to not be, you know, when you're renaming your layers, like it helps clean things up, but you don't have to be so, sometimes it's not helpful to be super specific. Like just calling something a container, like it can be better. Not being like budget name and email container, or I don't know. Yeah. Just knowing like, hey, this just needs to hold some stuff can be helpful. Now let's go back to our demo budget. What I'm interested in, remember I brought up the truncating text. Okay, I wanted to see how it behaves with these buttons because I was looking at it down here earlier, but let's see up here. So give me my little placeholder. Okay, so you can see it's happening at the email level. Let me see if I can rename this budget. Demo budget long name goes here. Yeah, that truncates as well. Awesome. And we've got a feature that to support that now. So that's really cool. So we can select all these and update that. Turn on truncation. Turn on truncation. Great. So if we were to ever build some prototypes with this, our stuff would behave the same way as over here. All right, so that is much better. Oh, wow. Okay, I know earlier I was saying like they look like buttons, they're behaving like tabs. They are, in terms of their anatomy, they're just list items with links, which kind of reminds us of like Figma's pages, right? Very similar. I would expect these to be the same, honestly. But here I just am noticing that I named it button, right? Button, budget menu. So we're gonna have different types of buttons. I'm remembering that now. And this is an interface rep. This is a piece, this is something that looks like a little chunk of interface. So I want to give it, I want all of my components for this file to have these little pictograms so I can really start to test this stuff out. For the YNAB logo, well, this would be kind of a new thing. It's not really a piece of interface. It's like an asset that we need. It's like branding. Now, I would say that this perhaps, I would be down to explore again. I don't know how YNAB's product team has their stuff set up, but like, if I was really, really doing this, and I'm not going to do it because I don't have a paid Figma account, so I don't actually have the ability to create library files proper, but in the real world, this would maybe live in a different Figma file. It wouldn't live in like the products component library. I would not be at all surprised if there was like a separate library file for brand assets. And I don't think, when I'm thinking about these definitions and these different types of components, I'm super much in like a product design headspace. So I don't know, I'll make an exception for this one. It's not gonna get a little pictogram. All right, and then we've got the beginnings of icons here. And we're probably gonna definitely have more of these, so we'll need to corral them sometime. And then our sidebar. Let's see, I've got a note for myself. The max width is 596. The minimum width before dropping all the text is 150. The true minimum width, right? Like the absolute minimum is 55. And that's where we get icons only. That makes sense. If we come back over here. Yeah, so this is like our 55 pixel arrangement. And then if we just nudge over just enough, it's like what did I say, 150 for this guy. Okay. That's helpful to know. Great. Sidebar. This is an interface representative, right? It's this chunk. And it's not complete. We have way more in here that needs to get represented, right? We only have this top section. So let's build the rest. And now we've got these buttons. And they're going to be like really similar to these. So I'm actually just going to peel off an instance and start componentizing it. And let's see, what are they called? I think, I was thinking about this last time about how much I'm like using inspect and really looking at the class names. And I thought like, this might be slowing me down more than it is like helpful. Like I could really just name stuff whatever I wanted and go faster by doing that. But I think I'm going to stick with this approach. I think seeing the CSS and the HTML structure is going to get me to, I can have higher accuracy sooner. And that's what I'm going for. I'm recreating an existing thing. I'm not like exploring new ideas. Okay, so we've got these link items. They're called navlink. Yep, navlink reports and then like navlink budget. So I wonder if I have a screenshot of this already, actually. I've got the accounts. Yeah, I don't think I have this specifically. So now I've got like our default state, our hover state. Maybe I can, on this one, what does our focus state look like? Active state, nothing. Focus visible. Let me grab focus visible, actually. Now, I'm wondering if they've custom styled their focus visible state or if, actually just copy paste this over here. Or if this is default Firefox, which is the browser that I'm using. Either way, we'll stick with it. All right, so we definitely don't need as much stuff going on here. We do have like some sort of icon thing, and they definitely have a label, so we can delete that. We probably don't need this to have a container for this. Oh, I didn't even finish. Oh my gosh. Okay, before I get any further there, these don't need to have all these darn containers in them. Right? Let's see, logo. This is necessary. The padding is not. But then we lose our stuff. So let me just grab an instance of that. And detach it. Oh, and our, okay, let me grab, yeah, I'm breaking my things by doing this, but okay. So we're looking at, go down to this padding, 16 and 13. And for the fill, we're using teal 500. And we have, we'll go to our corner radius, a corner radius of 6. how much lighter is that? This is what I'm really excited about losing the base components. Layer counter is, oh, it should be telling, oh, include nested layers. Yeah, 12. Okay. Yeah, just how much lighter stuff is going to get, because that was the one negative trade-off. In addition to what I didn't realize was, you know, Figma has to render, if an instance is using variants, all those variants are getting rendered every time you drop an instance onto the canvas. So high variant count was also kind of more expensive than we realized. So that's an exciting thing. So you can see, you know, original setup with the base components, that isolated corner radius and padding and all that stuff. 12 layers for a single piece. This has 10. It's a little bit of savings. It's not as dramatic as I thought. Oh well. We're just gonna undo some stuff. Yeah, no, we need, well, I'll put that. There we go. Yeah, this should also change. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. 16, 13, and then teal 650. With a 6 pixel border radius. Same here, ungroup, ungroup, ungroup. Oh, wrong one. Okay, this is interesting that I decided to do a stroke for that. I'm wondering if I just want to double check that I've actually got the right kind of, yeah, no, this should be a style, this focus ring. Just double check, take a quick screenshot. I want to compare that to this guy. Yeah. Okay, that should be a style. And I want to use drop shadows instead. That's more appropriate. And actually probably the only way we can achieve this. So we don't want to blur, and we don't want there to be any offset from the X or Y axes. We'll want 100% here. Now, it's not giving me the spread because I don't have clip contents turned on. But now that I do, can set that up. So let's see what we've got. It looks like there's this like 2 pixel blue ring, and then on beyond that 1 pixel of white. So what we need first is to establish the white. We have to work in layers. So overall, we need a spread of 3, and we need that to be white. And then another drop shadow goes on top of that. Same deal. No offset from the axes. This will be our blue color. And we need that to have a spread of 2. So what that means is should match. Looks good. Okay, great. So now we've got a style. We'll call this focus visible. And we can apply that other places. Great. Okay, so now this one is officially wrapped up. Now I can move my attention back to these buttons. I'm just going to set up the variants that I know I need. I still think, you know, with interactive, or I'm sorry, with component properties, it can be hard to, you know, with these new features, it's like, oh, should I still do something the old way? And I think in the case of setting up interactive states, that is still very appropriate for variants. Okay, not that teal. I'm kind of just eyeballing. And then I'll need one of these for the focus visible. And that's not working because I didn't have clip contents turned on. Oh, what's the deal? I have focus visible. Why don't I get clip contents? Or how come it's not showing up? Oh, rats. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna redo some of those. These have, yeah, nested layers that were unnecessary. Okay, and hold on, let's just set this up right. We've got an icon. We gotta, yeah, instead of using these old things, I really should be starting from scratch for some of these. We've got an icon on the left. We've got the button label there. And this is probably, these don't truncate. You can see for like toolkit reports. Now, actually, oh my gosh, in toolkit reports is not an official thing. It is something that there's a plugin. Toolkit for YNAB is something a third party has produced. But yeah, and it looks like they just, right when we start to clip on the S in account. So we're not getting truncation here is what I'm getting at. But you can really see that with toolkit reports, which is probably, I mean, like it's using the same styles, so that makes sense. I guess it's kind of handy to have like a third-party thing with a slightly, it's more of a worst case scenario than accounts, which is the longest label of what comes with vanilla YNAB. So either way, no truncation. So we can leave this set to hug. I'm going to leave this icon as is for now, but we're going to need to extract these ones at some point. And let's see what we're working with for padding. Maybe it's set. Yeah, it's set here. So we've got 6.4 on top and bottom. Oh, and then the button. Okay, the button has a margin of 16 pixels. I don't think I will set, again, I'm not going to set up my stuff quite the same way because this isn't super intuitive to me. Like, we can set up the Figma components to be a bit different. And what else? It has a height of 24. So, okay, maybe we do need to extract these SVGs. Am I able to just copy? There's nothing in that frame. How do I get these SVGs? Oh my gosh. Okay, some paths. Can I get all the paths? What happens if I just paste in? Dang it. Ah, no good. Okay. Okay, no worries. We are going to pretend that this icon is it. Oh, and let's, yeah, fine. We know our icons here. take up 24 pixels. They're 24 by 24. So we've got 16 pixels of padding. Is that going to be true on the right also? I guess not, right? Because this happens. So we'll just have that be 0. And then for the top and bottom, it was like 6.4. I wonder if, I might have covered this last time and I'm forgetting, but I'm wondering, like, do these even have a fill? They might not need it because, you know, they're sitting in a container that has a fill color already. So like, is this color on hover really just like a tint? It could be. Yeah, I think that's the case. But when we get to their interactive states, they do have a fill. So our default could look a lot like this. Okay, now what's the space between the label and the icon? 8 pixels. Yeah, great. Okay. And probably also a border radius of 6. Oh, right, they're using rems in all these places, so we kind of had to eyeball it. Okay, and while I'm thinking about it, these are button sidebar. They're like views, but they're views of your budget. View tabs. Oops. Okay, now we can do hover states and things like that. So we're gonna want, oh, not the stroke, the fill. 650. Correct. No, 700. Is that also the case here? Wow, do those use different cover states? I'm gonna have to examine that again later. And then for our focused visible state, again, why? Yeah, there we go. Clip contents is turned on. Okay, that's great. I turn that off though. We do need a fill, so whether I like it or not, we're gonna have to have a fill for our focus state, even though if it's not necessary, it's kind of like the default, but we're just adding rings around it. We have to turn clip contents on if we want those drop shadows to be visible. It'll be fine. Okay, great. And then we need our active button. Break, reconnect. These are all variants. Add auto layout to this button. I lost my button name of view tabs, but we'll add it back in. Great, and we can organize these. So we've got default, we've got hover, we've got focused, and then we've got, now I'm gonna say this is also default. This is something I see a lot of people doing. By a lot, I've seen this happen many times where folks will have, you know, they will correctly set up interactive states using variants, but they'll lump other things in there that I think are kind of different. they'll lump in like disabled and also like active, like, you know, like, or if it was a checkbox, like checked, unchecked, you know, that's like a state, which makes sense. But I think we're kind of talking about one more layer to it. There's like state of ability, right? Like, can you interact with it? That's a yes no question. But then there's like, if you can interact with it, there's like multiple visual states possible there, right? Like there's its like default resting state, there's its hover state. Like we see here, there is a focus state where there's rings around it. So you've got three things that can't be handled with like a Boolean toggle switch. So you need the drop down. And then like for form stuff, sometimes like the validation winds up in there. I think these are separate variants is what I'm saying. So when I say state, like that is like default hover focus. If we're talking about is it disabled, that's a yes no question. So that's a different property. We don't have to worry about that for this one. But similarly, I would want to have a state for like active, and that would have a Boolean toggle as well. Like these are all, these are states. These like default hover and focus states are going to be states for non-active tabs, right? This one's active though. So yeah, that gets marked true. So now when we're working with this component, like, if I'm working with an inactive tab in a container here that has, you know, my background, like if this is the view that I'm in, right? And we'll confirm this. Like this doesn't even have, let me refresh and I'll clear all the custom stuff I did. Like if I hover over this, I'm not getting a hover state on this active tab. We're on budget. We're looking at budget. This is active, right? This is not, like we're not actively on this tab, but this has a hover state to show that I can like switch to it. I can click on it. Now this one's active. So that's why I think it's worth separating these things out so there's not confusion. And yeah, if we had a disabled state, I would do the same thing. There would be a Boolean property. It would be enabled. Yes, no. So, but this is great. We've got view tabs now. So button label, button label, button label. That's looking good. We've got another interface rep. Now this means, oh my gosh, are we using the correct 16 over 19.2? I want to make sure we get the right text style happening. Oh my gosh, I remember this being really hard to figure out because it's a lot of rems or M's. Oh, I'm gonna have to trust. I'm gonna have to, you know what? Actually, let's pull one of these out. We'll copy it. We'll go over to our inventory, slide over. Like we got a screenshot here. Let's just eyeball it. That looks good. Like, what are our other options? 12? Nah. Oh, okay. And I named these things. Oh my gosh, grouped by, okay, stuff in the side nav. This rocks. I don't know if this architecture, this like organizational strategy is going to hold up because it could be the case that this gets used in a lot of other places, but in which case we might want to rethink this. But for now, this is great. I'm kind of like chunking out my styles. Inspector. Oh, that's the thing on the right. Uh-oh, okay. Side nav button? No. Nah, all right, all right. We're safe. I think this is safely that one. We're good. All right, excellent. So we need another container in here because we've got our budget menu, but we need a bunch of these guys. How many do we need? We need 3. We need budget, reports all accounts. Toolkit reports is an extra third-party thing, so not necessarily. Now, these aren't filling all available space, which I would want to be the case, so we'll set that to fill. This is behaving just as it would IRL. Let's reset these. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And we don't want them stacking on top of each other like that. Like you can see here when I hover, there is some space between. So what's the margin on these list elements? 4 pixels. So we'll use auto layout to handle that. Wrap those in an auto layout frame, 4 pixels between, and budget reports all accounts. Let's go ahead and name those because, ooh, okay though. I think this is safe to do here. I'm hesitating to add in like the true labels because that feels like content, but this isn't a piece of like, this is a really fixed piece of interface. Like the side nav shows up once. It's not like we're talking about like, this is an e-commerce product. And we've got like little, like for all the things we're selling on our site, we've got these little like cards, and our products on our e-commerce website have different names, and we're not like putting in like shampoo, conditioner, like I think it's different. I feel safer doing this, but this is a really interesting thing to note about, man, it's like it makes me feel ill-equipped to propose definitions like this. This is why I'm really interested in getting other people to like give me some feedback on this because I've only worked on so many products in my short career. I've got, you know, opinions based on that experience, but there's a lot of products I haven't made. Things like a YNAB where it's a lot more app-like. So I want to make sure that these rules, again, my goal is to make some rules, some definitions that are useful for people beyond just me. And I need other people's help. I need other people's perspective to do that. It feels correct to just go ahead and put those labels in. All accounts. Accounts capitalized? Yes. Now, we've got the incorrect icon happening. I think that's okay here because we're not assuming content here. Like none of these say like we're not like it's budget by default, right? Like they just say label. It is kind of interesting. That's something to think about. Like what then becomes your default icon, you know, your agnostic icon, but I'm not going to sweat that right now. I will need to find a way to get these SVGs and get them out of there. So great. Well, with that, we can move on to this little budget accordion. Oh, and this is cool. So it's totaling, it's summing all of these accounts, these bank accounts that have fake bank accounts that have added in. It's summing them to say, this is how much money you have to work with right now. Like these are the dollars that you are going to assign jobs to. This behavior, this accordion behavior is interesting. And it's making me want to make this whole thing a component so you can get this like open close behavior for free when prototyping. That's okay. And that makes me think we're going to need another placeholder to swap out with content, right? Prototypes kind of need content to work. And who knows, we might have some prototypes where we only have 3 accounts, or where there's another one where we have 24. I don't think this would be a fun pressure test. We can, well, not test it for real, I guess, but I'd be interested to know if YNAB has a limit to how many bank accounts you can connect to a budget. But let's start with just getting these styles figured out. So if we zoom in on this little fella, I've got the focus state there. Interesting that it's like giving me that state. There we go. So we've got an icon that's not visually centered. I'm going to do it in Figma, like vertically visually centered with its accompanying label. But this is its own piece, and that's like separate from this value over here. So I'm curious about that. Like, where do you live? This little neighbor. Oh, okay. So we do have like, all right, nav accounts, another container. This is where we start to get some spacing happening. Oh, wait, hold up. That's interesting. Eight pixels on the sides. But when you hover over it. Okay. Sorry, I need to 8 pixels. I think we're accounting for those 8 pixels elsewhere. I want like the parent container to be in charge of that and the children fill rather than the children have like margins, which is, I mean, like when you think about that, like actually all we have to work with is padding. Figma, like we've got space between, right? Because like auto layout is basically flexbox. So yeah, these are kind of forced to be set up different. So it's cool. I think this 8 pixels on the left, 5 on the right, yeah, we're accounting for that in a different way. And I think we'll do the same with this dude. I'm expecting to see the same numbers. Yeah, 8, 5. So then within that, okay, within this div, you've got like a button. This is the thing that you press to open and close. But the whole div is clickable for expanding and collapsing stuff. And then you've got your sum. Oh, what are you? Nav account icons. Are you like hidden? I wonder what shows up here. There's some sort of like secret icon happening here. I know for these, like in my real budget, these are all fake, you know, they're not actually hooked up to anything. But if YNAB ever has trouble importing your bank data, like the transactions, maybe you know, the connection is not good between your bank and YNAB, or there's something going on with, what do they use? I always want to call it Stripe, and it's not that. Plaid. They use Plaid to connect to your bank account securely. If that connection is ever not good, there'll be like some little warning icon that shows up here. I might have to grab that from my real account where that does sometimes show up to get that SVG, that icon in. And I wonder if that happens on this like budget level as well. Okay, well, start building that guy. So again, we've got some sort of icon. And what's the height? A little 8x8 guy. We'll put it fixed for both. Oh, golly. I'm going to have to revisit how icons are set up. Whatever. We're good for now. Oh, budget. Now. That looks correct. Again, we're gonna vertically align these guys. We'll use our white color for the text. What's the space between? 8 pixels. Perfect. And then we've got this value over here hanging out. And it looks like it's the same size, 11 pixels. I just want to see if we have that anywhere else. Doesn't look like it. It might be the same. Do the pennies? It does. Oh, but it's not as tracked out as this. It's a normal level. So let me break that and just set that to auto. Auto. Okay, maybe 0. Should give this a fill so we can like actually look at it. Let's see. Do you have any tracking happening? Oh, user data currency positive. Letter spacing normal, word spacing normal. Okay. And what are they calling this? User data currency. I guess we'll add it to the side nav for now, but I'm really going to be interested to see once we start getting to this section, if we've got like that same, you know, if this text style is going to be the same as these. So, side nav. I want to call it currency. I guess I want to call it like dollar amount. That's fine. That's fine for now. Okay. Now, I don't think I want to see if budget truncates. We won't get the chance to see. At some point, that goes away. Ooh, okay. That's kind of cool. All right. Well, we've got that. There's no hover state, but it does take up a certain amount of space. So let's get that figured out. This button is 16 pixels tall, which makes sense. So that's driven by the text size, and it's in a bigger div. And the div doesn't have padding? I guess it's just... Okay, it's like double the height. Maybe it's like a fixed height situation. What did it say, 32? Yeah, it was like double the amount. And then filling all available space, probably. But it's got that 8 pixels and that 5. So yeah, this would be like our budget component. Now, to push this over, we're gonna have to either set budget to fill or like use some containers and then do auto space between, but I don't think I want to do that. So what would this be? This would be like sidebar section. How are we naming other? Oh, I want to, oops. I want this to be in like a container, like a variant of 1. So I can set this to fill. And now, instead of dropping that in, I can drop that in and it'll fill all available space, just as it would in real life. Now, that doesn't look correct to me. We know that it needs to be like knocked over, so I wonder what that looks right. It's lining up, I guess, with those other icons. Oh, 20 pixels? Oh my gosh, I need to nudge them out. How do I fix this? So probably more like 16. I'm fine with eyeballing that for the time being. Okay. Oh, but we want sidebar. I'm just going to leave this as is. I guess I need to have a property to have that. This container present section is what this was called. Okay. And this is also not correct. You can see, like, I'm looking at the alignment here. Where's my rulers? Like, looking at where this icon ends and like this is spilling past it, like that's not the case here. So these need to get scooched over. Pixels, but where? Oh, it's bizarre. I don't know where I'm gonna find those numbers. Maybe it's also just 16. That looks great. It looks like 16. It's in alignment. It's not quite the case here. It goes even further over. Maybe 24. Yeah, it's good enough for now. Okay, so we've got like our budget section. This is like a section of the side nav. If we had other types of accounts, I think like if we had mortgages and loans, those would go into a different section. So I don't think they'll get treated any differently, but let's say we have a student loan. Student loan, we owe $20,000. It's, oh my gosh, 3% interest rate. I have no idea if that's like, and we need to make $180 payments a month. Which category do you want to pair with your loan? We'll just create a new category, add it to one of our existing category groups called debt payments. Oh, maybe, okay, we already have something. Student loan. Great. Aha, okay, so you can see I've added that in. So that's another section. Oh my gosh, and this unlocked all this other stuff that I haven't even never looked at in the inspector, the budget inspector. Check this out. This progress piece is new. Oh, I'm so glad we did that. Okay. So it seems like this budget section of the side nav is kind of required. It's like, this is the point, right? Whether or not somebody has loans and what type of loans and how many is unknowable. Tracking accounts. Yes, this is another type. So there's like these three possible sections. There's your budget, your budget accounts, mortgages and loans, and tracking accounts. So if we wanted to track an investment that we've made, that would get its own section too. Let's say okay. Stonks. What's your current account balance? We have $1,000 in stonks. I want to see if this unlocks more stuff in the inspector. Okay, there we are, a third section. So we've got our stonks. We're in the budget. This isn't associated. This account isn't, that makes sense, associated with anything in the budget. We might choose to have a category where we set aside money to invest here. And then we transfer, it would look like a transfer of checking to stonks, but okay. So these are kind of optional, but like you're gonna have these. And why I'm pointing that out is because I think our component then should come with this. But what I'm wondering is, do we add in loans? Do we add in tracking? What if we have a mortgage? Or an auto? Okay, so like all these things have loan. What if we have a mortgage? Also 3%. And we pay $1,600 a month. Oh my God, 1,600, not 1,000. Are there escrow installments or other fees? Let's say yes and see. Oh my God, I don't know what any of this would actually be in real life. 200. Pair your loan with a budget category. Let's do a new one. True expenses. Okay, so even though a mortgage is another type of thing, I gotta see for sure. I don't want to risk not knowing. Like medical debt, busted leg, and for my busted leg, I still owe $8,000, and it's got like a 8% interest rate, and I have to pay $500 a month. And let's create a new category for busted leg for debt. All gets put under loans. I'm not able to change what loans is called. Like I don't get to decide like that it's all debt, right? It's just gets under loans. So that's helpful to know that this is like a fixed. Users can't adjust what that label of this section is. And I'm going to assume the same is true for tracking, assume the same is true for budget. There's nothing in here that lets me edit that. So one way we could do this for the component is to, because there's only 3 possible buckets, have them built in. Loans, tracking, right? They have their values here. And if somebody needed their sidebar for like a prototype, but they don't need loans and tracking, we could use component properties. Loans true. Tracking true. We could use component properties to just say like, hey, like for my prototype, I'm only dealing with somebody who has budget, right? So they can just turn those off. Okay. Let's leave it like that for now. We can always change our mind later. But we've got that set up. Now I need the ability to open and close these things. And this is where I think placeholders are going to make a comeback, right? Because I don't think it would be wise for the component to try and make any predictions about how much content a designer needs to prototype with. Like it could be one budget account, it could be 20. It should be, designers would instead make their own local component out of these account links. I guess, what are these called? But they would make their own component of like a group of these, these links for with content that they need for their prototype or their mockup. Use auto layout, componentize it, swap it in. Like this will, in our component library component, just look like a big purple box because we're going to use our placeholder. But they would swap those out, cut out the purple box, swap in their content. We could make that really easy, give them a starter kit too, right? Give them a whole starter kit so that way they can just like break the starter kit and get going. I have found that the asset panel is like not super fun to deal with all the time. So starter kits are a good workaround, and could be really helpful for onboarding new designers to the team. Kind of find their way around the system. But first we need to have like some sort of like open close functionality. So to do that, and I'm really going to need that SVG. I don't think I can avoid it much longer. This is just a single path. Maybe this will work. CSS path. No. As SVG. Ugh. Okay, it's fine for now. I'm gonna zoom out. We're gonna take a screenshot and trace it. Kind of janky, but we'll be okay. We want white. We want round endpoints. We also want to be not in that edit mode so we can get rounded corners. And there it is. Oh, we want all our endpoints to be round. Okay. Great. That's an icon. It should live with our other guy. Now, Rid put out a thread recently on, I'm going to find it because it was really good. Icon management, not a thread, a video. Let me real quick find it. But basically, yeah, icon wrappers. Okay. Get this ad out of here. The friendly icon wrapper. This was a really excellent video, and I think this is a really good demo that he has going here. So he's talking about how there's these kind of 3 different approaches he's seen people take, and they've each got their own sort of pitfalls. You know, in terms of like, how do you handle icons inside of other components? And this one that he's gesturing towards right now is to have multiple icons, but use hidden layers to only like show hide one at a time. That's no good. And then this is actually what I've been doing, this third thing. Having size be a property of each icon, it gives you a lot of tight control, but then if you ever want to introduce a new size or change one of your sizes, that's a little bit of like management hassle, but as I think is becoming a popular and good opinion is that who cares if it's a management hassle? It's, you know, that's not what we should be worried about. So this is like, of these three approaches, this is probably the least offensive, but Rid's system is a lot better where he's got like these vector shapes, but then instances of these like, an arrow icon like he has here, get rewrapped in, the icon then gets rewrapped into its own main component, and you've got a component specifically for handling size. And then you can just have size managed in one place instead of at every single icon level, which is really smart because, again, with component properties, this gets even easier to manage. You can drop in your icon wrapper. And I think when Rid made this video, yeah, we didn't have component properties yet, but you're only one level away from being able to swap with any other icon. Now you could just select the icon wrapper and swap from there. So I think he kind of has a cool future-proof system. So you can see here's the icon wrapper. If he wants a bigger size, he can just go to large. And if he needs something that's not an icon, again, just 2 layers away. So really neat setup. I think I will try and adopt to that same thing. So we've got our chevron, and it's like a weird size, but that's cool. So we'll grab a copy of that, come down here, move this guy over. Now, how does YNAB do it? So they've got like a chevron pointing down to indicate that an accordion is open, and then their chevron points to the right when it's closed. So we're going to need chevron right. Oh. Right. Grab the vector. Twist. Okay, yeah, these should actually be in proper square shapes, and I shouldn't be this really messy naming of vector 1. Let's just call it icon. Yeah, and here I was using like auto layout and all this stuff. I'm gonna have to revisit icons in a future session. This is like really not how I like to handle them, but I'm focused on building this right now. So we've got, let's see. Open and close are binary states, so I think this is a safe place to use a toggle. So we'll call it open. You could go the other direction and say closed, and we'll say that this is true, false. Let me flip the order of those. So now our closed variant is on top, our open one is on the bottom. I really should add a background color to these. For now, let's do it at the section level, just so we can see what's going on. And I'm also gonna put some space between these guys. Okay, so for our section that's closed, we know that we want to use a right-facing guy. Yeah, this is already not working out because, okay, this needs to be in a square. I can't not do it. So let's have a fixed width. Let's just say 16 by 16. Oh my gosh. I don't want this to scale. How about we just keep you center, center. And let's use auto layout. And for both of you guys, fixed. Yeah, fixed all the way around. Now, fixed on your parent containers. 16, 16. I don't think this is actually the case in the product. Let's go back. Let's look at these chevrons again. Eight by 8. Okay. Reduced by half. That will help us out down here. Now these should be lining up. 8 by 8, 8 by 8. These don't look aligned. They are? Oh my gosh. Okay. Good. Better to check. So for our closed one, we don't have to worry about the placeholder content. And there's no easing on this animation, which makes this really easy, actually. So where I would want there to be a swapper to swap in, you know, X number of accounts, I only need to have that on the open budget. So if I get my placeholder and add that in, it's in a weird spot. I don't want it there. I think what we need here is to have these guys in their own container so we can change the auto layout direction. Set this to hug. Again, this needs to be fill. Now, this could present a problem because now we've got a different layer structure. We've got a container wrapping around this text where that's not the case here. So I want to run a little test. Like, this is where our eventual, set that to hug. This is where our eventual accounts are going to go. But like, let's say I'm working with this in a prototype and instead of 12,000, let's say it's like 9,000. I'm going to give this a fill so we can see what we're doing. And then let's say I switch from open to closed. Okay, that's great. That's working. Oh, I need some. Shoot. 8 pixels. Okay, I don't want to do a fixed height. I need to have 8 pixels on the top and bottom. So that way I can do that same thing here. So right when I open and close this, this is good. I've not lost this override. That was my concern because I have a different layer structure. But I think because my layers have the right names, we're good. This still says 12,000. This says 12,000. This says 12,000. Now that's a horrible layer name, right? This should get overridden. This layer name should be more like account balance. That's what we want. And this should be label, right? This is the label of our section. And it still works just fine. So what we could do is swap this in for however many accounts we have here. Like in this case, in this demo file, I've got checking, savings, emergency. We've got 3. We could swap those in as a group. I'm really pleased with how smooth this streaming has been. I think I'm gonna call it quits here. It's been an hour and a half, but it feels really good to be able to do this work and talk through these ideas and not be inhibited by the performance of my machine. So yeah, I mentioned Rid a couple times in this stream. He's been a great follow. If you're looking for folks to follow who really know their way around Figma, would highly recommend checking out his Twitter account for some useful tips. I've learned a lot from him. Really grateful that he's doing the work he's doing. And of course, he's the maker of Figma Academy. This is not by any means like a paid promo. I just have personally gotten a lot out of what he's put out, so want to plug him and his work for other folks. I imagine people who are watching this are the type who would be interested in such a thing. So if you made it this far, thanks. I'm hoping to do this more regularly. Would love to see some folks join live to help me work through and noodle through some of these ideas. But yeah, until then,